It's into 9 a.m. in Central African time. Welcome to the show. If you've just started listening, this is The Journal. Across Africa, chronic illnesses such as diabetes, hypertension, obesity, kidney disease, fatty liver disease, and some cancers are becoming an increasingly important part of our health conversations in terms of really learning about them. Yet, when we talk about prevention, one of the most basic questions is often overlooked. What are we putting on our plates is the big question. In the book, The Nigerian Food Prescription, The Health of the Future Enterprise explores Nigeria's food, indigenous diets, and seasonal eating patterns, drawing from years of research to examine the relationship between food, health, and well-being. So let's explore some of the powerful guidelines in this particular book. On the line with me is Osinakachi Akuma Kalu, who is founder and board chair of Afrolongevity. And as I understand it, he works in biophilosophy as well and in longevity research. Welcome to the program. Thank you for the time.
Thank you for having me back again on the show.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Always a pleasure. I'd like to start, for those that are not familiar, fascinated by the work that you do. What exactly is biophilosophy, and what does longevity research entail?
Okay, so because I moved from philosophy to health science and longevity science, so I use philosophy to question some of the scientific postulations that I feel do not take care of certain inquiry about the human conditions. So, for example, we Africans, there are a lot of things that I think that we need to research very well, and people always dumping scientific inquiry against cultural evaluation or things like what we call intergenerational models. And it's been very amazing since I switched, and I've been enjoying the journey, and it's been changing some narrative. And most persons in the scientific field are currently enjoying it. So, yeah.
It sounds absolutely amazing, but I want to talk a little bit about, before we get into this wonderful wellness guide that you've put together, there is quite a lot of interest around Nigerian food. But what excites me is that we're moving away from looking at the typical Nigerian diets, the popular ones, the fufus and the ugusus and all of that, but we're looking at indigenous foods and tracing it all the way back to some of the fermented foods that are also part of the indigenous diets. But let's talk about Nigerian food and the history of Nigerian nutrition.
The Nigerian nutrition is as old as the history of Nigeria. So in the work, I try to position the very fact that before now, there was nothing like Nigeria, there was nothing like Cameroon, there was nothing like Ghana. And when you look at Africans, we are divided along cultural lines. And there are some foods that you can find in Nigeria and also in Ghana or in some part of Cameroon and all that. So it's more or less West African food, or food that is being designed for the people living at the center of the equator, right? So I try to help people to understand that we don't even have African food per se, because we have different weather conditions and bioavailability across Africa that provide solutions, nutritional solutions to all our problems. And we can find that not just in the food, but in our herbs shops, and also our weather conditions. And our indigenous foods tends to have those medicinal properties that we struggle to acquire from the pharmacies and all that. So if you want to look at Nigerian nutrition or Nigerian food, you have to trace it back to Nigerian bioavailabilities, and then most of the things that people call Nigerian food, like the jollof and then the cassava or the fufu, are not inherently Nigerian food, like the cassava that they use in producing the fufu or the akpu. Those are plant-based food that came from South America, North American, and during the colonial eras, they brought it. When they were exploring Africa, so they brought it because it would be easier for them to get the stem and then plant it, then process it into the gari, what we call gari or the apple. But then we changed the method because we love fermented foods. We changed the method by culturing those things and ensuring that we isolate and bring out probiotics from the foods like the cassava them. We have the polished rice. All these things are not the jollof rice and all that. It's a mispronunciation of Wolof. It's not even indigenous to Nigeria, neither is it original to Ghana and all that. So, but in that book, I tried to trace down to some of the foods that are already going extinct. And
Right.
those foods are what would help us slow down or reverse our biological aging, which is being damaged by modern diets.
Oh my goodness, this is a book that we all need to get our hands on. But I think you know what's really fascinating to me, Osi, is how similar all our diets are on the continent. I mean, when I study the Nigerian ways of fermentation, you're turning sorghum into burukutu, for example, the cassava that you mentioned that now gets turned into fufu, and the milk getting turned into masa, etc. I mean, we have similar ways of doing food in Southern Africa, where we turn sorghum into ting, for example, and milk into mashi, as it were. So we are so similar in our ways, and I think this is definitely a book for everybody to read. Tell you what, we're going to take a break and return, continuing to unpack a brand new book as written by Osinakachi, who is a founder and board chair of Afrolongevity. But in his new book, The Nigerian Food Prescription, The Health of the Future Enterprise, there he explores Nigerian foods, indigenous diet, and seasonal eating patterns. We'll return after this.
Call us on +27 63 406 9126 and contribute to the conversation.
Drivers, this winter, South Africa's roads can change in seconds. One moment it's clear, next, dense fog blinds your view. Don't drive on memory, drive on visibility. If you can't see clearly beyond 50 meters, pull over safely at the nearest truck stop. Stay alert, stay alive, check your surroundings, and inform others. See and be seen. Let's navigate winter roads together. This message is brought to you by the National Department of Transport.
Celebrating women, changing communities, countries, and the continent. Women's Month on Channel Africa. Fitness and nutrition on the channel.
20 minutes into 9 a.m. in Central African time, we continue our conversation with the founder and board chair of Afrolongevity, Osinakachi Akuma Kalu, who also has written a really important book that explores Nigerian diets. The book is titled The Nigerian Food Prescription, The Health of the Future Enterprise, and it explores Nigerian foods, indigenous diets, and the preservation thereof, and of course, seasonal eating patterns. This is now years and years of research that has gone into this particular book to really examine people's relationship with indigenous diets and the well-being, as we noted in modern day societies. I want to talk to you about I want to stay on that note that you brought up in this last segment around, modern African societies and how our diets have changed and how we also have sort of forgotten who we are through our food and what we need to put on our plates. So how are you going to perhaps use this? Because you described the book as healing intelligence, if I remember correctly, healing intelligence within African food and culture. So how do you think this book is then going to help us to remember, the diets of our ancestors, and why do you think that that's so important at this time?
There is something that we call genomics in longevity because my area of specialty is longevity science. And when I started working in the field of longevity, I was looking at the longevity divides in Africa and why we have the burden of disease and the diseases that are becoming chronic and terminal diseases that are becoming prevalent, and why most of these diseases never existed 100, 150 or 200 years ago. And sometimes most of these diseases in the past, we called them a disease of the rich because it was the rich that were able to afford some of the things, some of the box food, packaged food, or what we call food with shelf life. When I was reading the works of Robert Lufkin, I realized where he did mention that most of the low income countries or third world countries that are making use of American standard dietary plans, or what they call dietary requirements, forget easily that it gives rise to the American standard of disease or the European standard of disease. And those standard of diseases are being found in countries that doesn't even have the American standard of healthcare or the European standard of healthcare. Why? Because we tend to forget that food is not just energy, but food is information. Let me explain that quickly. Our cells, our cells understand foods that are being trained with. Our ancestors ate those food, and when you start bringing in new foods, they struggle to interpret those food because those information is completely new to them. So once they get confused, it inflames the body, causes deregulation, and it becomes what a disease that present because most of the diseases that we call like the Alzheimer, age-related diseases or chronic diseases like the diabetes and all that, they are lifestyle diseases, right? They are lifestyle diseases, and it is because of what we eat. And now it is more difficult because we have sedentary lifestyle. Like you go to your office, you sit down for long and all that. There is no productive gymming. Like you expose yourself from to sunlight and all that. So as a result, we now have some of those terminal and chronic diseases that even start from infants and all that. So it becomes a burden to the continent. So what I'm doing, because I'm already training people across South Africa, Cameroon, Ghana, we have communities of people that we are training because I've lived in South Africa for a while and all that. So we are bringing people to their biodiversity and bioavailability, for them to eat natural, for them to eat local, so as to connect back to their gene. This is what we call genetic and evolutionary nutrition. You have to eat what you have evolved to become and who you have evolved to become. So once you eat that, you now be in sync, and then you will separate yourself from the burden of chronic and terminal diseases. So the food reconnects you back to your root and then help you to avoid those diseases and conditions.
Yeah. 100% agree with everything you've said in terms of cellular memory, especially, and I'm a big advocate for that. And just several weeks ago, actually, we were speaking about food combinations and things like that, which is another thing that I'm very concerned about, because we've got so much access and so much opportunity to explore with our diets that sometimes it can be detrimental, where I'm in India for breakfast and then in China for lunch and then in a completely different continent for dinner. But let's talk about traditional African cooking, because the food combination thing is quite important to us in terms of contributing to our methods of preparation. So what is it that we can learn from the way our ancestors used to prepare and combine the food for longevity purposes that can actually still be beneficial today?
Well, our ancestors take time to make food. They take their time to make food. They understand that food is part of life and it is medicine. I'll give you a practical example. Your disposition, in most cases, when you are cooking, influences the food. And
Yeah.
Most of the food that we cook, we make use of herbs. And if we are cooking food, we take our time to cook the food. And then someone is teaching you that you should cook with low heat and you shouldn't boil the food very well. And in most cases, we don't understand that some vegetables contains indigestible carbohydrates, and it becomes very complex when you are dealing with that. And some other things that we need to understand is the herbal combination. Most of the combine the herbs and the spice, and sometimes those spice helps to make the herbs absorbable. For example, you can't be using turmeric without black pepper, because black pepper helps for the absorption of the turmeric when cooking or when you are making your tea. So these are the nuances. And a practical example again is there was a time that a lot of literature came out that palm oil causes cholesterol. But after reviewing of the literature, the people that wrote the book, the people that wrote the literature or the research from Harvard didn't live in Africa, and they never understood the underlying condition for which the palm oil in Africa is being processed and produced. Now they use the Asian method of producing palm oil to write off palm oil, but forgetting that palm oil is fruit oil. No, the idea is that any seed oil causes inflammation, and they classified palm oil as seed oil. But the palm oil we use in West Africa is fruit oil. We use the fruit and not the seed inside. The seed inside, we call it palm kernel oil. So that is how the Asians could press the fruits and the kernel together. But here we don't do it that way. So now when we revisited it, we started re-educating. And don't forget that our doctors in Nigeria and Ghana have been asking people to stop using palm fruit oil, which is even medicinal. And because we cook with long heat and not just low heat, we cook with harsh heat in Africa. The only oil that sustains that type of cooking is palm fruit oil, because it is the only oil that suits what we call ketogenic diet. And most Africans don't cannot survive with being vegetarians. We can only survive through ketogenic or mild paleo because we were hunter-gatherers. We eat more of beef. And for you to survive based on that genetic and evolutionary model, you have to swing back to ketogenic diet or mild paleo. And the only oil that suits ketogenic diet is palm fruit oil, or you don't even put oil. So palm fruit oil is the best. And if you use the vegetable oil, which is even industrial oil, you are causing yourself harm. And if you are using olive oil, once you overheat olive oil, it becomes dangerous to your health. It inflames your health. So it is bad for salads and all those low heat cooking.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. You are speaking all my languages. Love it, love it, love it. The Nigerian Food Prescription is the name of the book, and I highly recommend this book. It's a comprehensive 900 plus page wellness guide and 365 days eating plan that you can find in this particular book that explores essentially at the core of it, food is medicine, cellular and metabolic health topics coming into play, local superfoods that are very accessible to many of us, but also ancestral wisdom that is weaved into these diets, as we noted. It is authored by Osinakachi Akuma Kalu, who has been joining me on the line. It has been absolutely wholesome to connect with you for the last couple of minutes. Thank you very much for engaging us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you very, very much. Yes, and all the best with the work that you are doing. Very, very important at this time. And I think it informs much of, food systems as well, and what is grown and what people have access to, which is another conversation for another day. But here we are at 9:32. Figilele Nwati standing by with the latest sports for this Monday. Happy Monday.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.